The mortuary doors slowly creaked open. They weren't locked like Trent originally thought they would be. I readied my handgun as Trent opened the doors completely. I cautiously walked inside, my finger ready on the trigger. The mortuary was empty. There were no staggering zombies or grotesque plague-walking monsters like outside. There were only 3 large metal tables, a few embalming tools, 4 rows of shelves meant to store the diseased, and a desk full of clutter. I lowered my handgun. "Empty," Trent confirmed as he lowered his own handgun. "Weird," I responded. "The one place I figured would be crawling with zombies during a zombie apocalypse is a morgue." I thought back to all the movies and games I played as a kid and remembered how there were always a decent amount of zombies waiting inside. "It's a forensics lab." "Really? Then why is there an incinerator in the other room?" I wasn't complaining about having it around. In fact, having an incinerator would help dispose of the bodies all around the building. It was just odd having one in a forensics lab. From what I read, it used to be a morgue, but it was later converted into a lab. That makes sense, I guess. "It'd be nice if there was something useful in here, though," Trent said as he picked up a metal scalpel and examined it. "I guess this is something." "This isn't about finding supplies. We need to make sure every inch of the police station is safe if we ever wanted to establish this as an outpost." I grabbed a stack of papers from the desk. "Finding supplies is just a plus." Yeah, Trent dismissed. I scanned through the papers but didn't find anything of value. They were just embalming notes. I had enough experience with the dead now as it was. I didn't need to read any of these papers. Trent pocketed the scalpel and began looking around but quickly stopped in my direction. "Hey, Bing. Look at this," Trent called out as he pointed to the clutter above the desk. I looked away from the mortician's notes and noticed a weak glow slowly pulsing behind a small stack of papers. I winced in confusion. I pushed the papers off the source of the light and found an expensive-looking laptop resting on the desk. I picked it up and set it on top of the stack of papers. "It's just a computer, nothing useful." Trent rested his left arm on one of the counters and rubbed his head with his right hand. "I guess it was too much to ask for this place to be zombie-free and full of supplies." He looked around for a moment. "What do we do now that the basement's cleared?" I shrugged. A devilish smile spread across Trent's face. "Ever wonder what kind of porn a mortician watches?" he asked. Sometimes it was hard to believe that Trent was a cop. I returned his question with an expression of mixed confusion and judgment. "No." "You want to find out?" he asked as he gestured to the computer. "No," I answered, a little disgusted. "I'm happy not knowing." "Well, too bad," Trent said as he grabbed the laptop and whipped most of the clutter off the desk. "You don't have any choice." He sat on the left side of the desk and patted the right side for me to sit on. I knew better than to argue with Trent. He was a charismatic devil with a silver tongue. He could charm the pants off of anyone on his worst day. He knew how to get what he wanted, and to save myself the time and shame, I decided it would just be best to do what he said. I reluctantly walked up to the desk. Trent smiled. "I knew you'd come around." He pushed off the remaining papers and dusted my would-be seat off. I looked at the pile of papers on the floor. "You gonna clean that?" "Afterwards," he agreed. I shrugged and sat beside him. He opened the laptop excitedly. The computer quickly booted up and opened a Word file that looked to be in the style of a diary. "Boring," Trent says as he switched out of the file to try to access the internet. "Hey, go back real quick." "What?" "Go back to the Word file." "But porn," he said almost disappointedly. "Just go back. I think I saw something." Trent let out a reluctant exhale, but switched back to the Word file without protest. I leaned in and began to read aloud. Log 1. Today started like any other day. I was relaxing watching my shows while eating some snacks when Dr. Malcolm burst through the doors with 3 police officers carrying a body bag. They were talking amongst each other using words like attacked and bitten, and phrases like no witnesses and attackers weren't found. I didn't get the entire story. I was too busy trying to hide my snacks and close my laptop to pay attention. Thank God they didn't notice. We aren't really supposed to have food in here or our laptops as televisions, but what Dr. Malcolm didn't know wouldn't hurt me. Anyway, he had the body placed on one of the metal slabs and dismissed the police officers afterward. Before I could ask him anything, he told me to hold off any procedures and wait for him as he went to make a phone call. I nodded. And with that, he left. It didn't take me too long to start getting bored. I couldn't go back to watching my shows now that I knew that Dr. Malcolm was right in the other room, so I decided to take a peek at my newly arrived guest. I absent-mindedly started to unzip the body bag. It was just some middle-aged guy, nothing special. I stopped when the zipper reached his neck. The left side of his neck looked like it had been partially gouged out. I took a closer look and saw what looked like bite marks. My curiosity had been piqued. I slowly brought the zipper further down the man's body. His white shirt was riddled with blood-stained holes. They continued down to his torso. I couldn't help but be a little unnerved by the state of the body. I wasn't used to seeing someone like this. I've worked as a forensic scientist for a little under a year, and I work in a city where crime is almost non-existent. We don't usually see too much action, let alone anything like this. With my curiosity sated, I zipped up the body and continued waiting for Dr. Malcolm. I waited for about 5 minutes until finally he came back in. "Let's get started," I told him, as casually as I could. But he shook his head and told me that the body wasn't going to be examined by us. Instead, we were going to incinerate it. I was a little taken aback by this. I asked him why that was, and he told me that the cause of death was already determined. I asked him what had killed the man. He said that the man had died from bullet wounds, that nothing out of the ordinary was found. I knew he was lying, but I didn't want to confront him. After work, I went back home and started writing this. I'm not sure what to make of today, but just in case something odd is happening, I'm making a log and emailing each part of it to a friend out of state. My name is Eric Michelson, and this is my log. Log number 2. It's been a week since my last log entry, so we've received more bodies that were marked for immediate incineration. That's 5 more since the first one came in, making a total of 6 bodies. I've been asking a few questions about the body disposal, but whenever I start to ask, Dr. Malcolm tells me just to do my job and not to worry. I get a raise a few days after I stopped my line of questioning. Dr. Malcolm implied that if I continued just doing as I'm told, I would get even more. I'm not really sure how to feel about this. On the one hand, I'm getting paid. On the other hand, I'm being silent. Log number 3. It's been 2 days since my last log entry. While Malcolm was away for lunch, I received another body at the lab. This was a golden opportunity to finally find out what's been happening. Malcolm would be gone for at least an hour, and in that time, I would find out as much as I could. I opened the body bag and found a young lady who looked like she must have been in her 20s. Her body was covered in bite marks, just as the original victim has been. I examined one of the wounds and found out that they were canine bite marks. I remember reading that there's been a rise in animal-related violence. It must have been some sickness that Malcolm knew about and didn't want to spread. That must have been the reason why we needed to incinerate the bodies immediately. I was disturbed by this revelation, but I felt a little better knowing what I was up against. I continued my examination and discovered something that I could not explain. One of the bite marks was done by a human. I thought I was mistaken, but as I continued examining, I found more and more human bite marks. The thing that killed this woman was a human. Log number 4. Since my examination yesterday, we've been receiving more and more bodies with the incinerate order. I don't understand what's happening. There shouldn't be this many victims. People are starting to notice, too. There are rumors that this is the act of some kind of evil cult. I'm not sure about that theory, but who knows what's going on? I know I don't. Log number 5. It's been 5 days since my last log entry in. As I was examining another body, I noticed that it began to twitch. But it wasn't the twitch I normally saw post-mortem. It looked like it was slowly starting to wake up. This weird movement didn't last too long. It stopped a few seconds later and became completely still. Even so, I couldn't help but feel enormously unnerved by this. Log number 6. Malcolm has gone missing since yesterday's log entry. I've taken up all of his responsibilities and do the incinerations as he did them. I think he left town. I think he was starting to catch on to what was truly happening and he panicked. I know I should leave too. As soon as I have my affairs in order, I'm out of here. Log number 7, 1 day since my last log entry. They brought Malcolm in today. The police officers who helped bring in the original victim brought in Malcolm today. They set him on the table and left me to dispose of him. As I examined him, I understood right away what had killed him. His body was riddled with bullets. They didn't want him to escape. I don't know who did it, but they know about us. They knew Malcolm had to be taken out. I can't leave anymore. I'm a prisoner here. We all are. Log number 8. 1 day since my last log. The bridge was closed today. None of us can leave. Whatever's been happening, whatever has been lurking around in the shadows, I have a feeling it's almost done hiding. I can't stand being in the lab anymore, so I started to spend my time in the police station's lobby. I feel better not being alone. Log number 9. A few hours since my last log. It happened. It finally happened. Officer Richards and Fisher were sent out to answer a public disturbance call. Everything seemed normal, but when Fisher came back without Richards, I knew something was wrong. I overheard him talking to another officer about the trip. He told him that Richards was killed by one of those monsters. Ever since then, we've been getting call after call of frightened citizens describing how they were going crazy and randomly becoming hostile. We've heard about how they try to eat the victims. That explains all the bites that I've seen on most of the dead that I've examined. Zombies. I can't help but laugh as I write that down. God, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe that there are living dead roaming around the streets. There are so many calls now. It's like they decided to attack all at once. There's nowhere to go now. I'm gonna stay here and hopefully wait this out. I hope someone is coming to find us. Log number 10. The police are starting to find survivors and bring them to the police station for protection. Everyone here has been working hard to try and keep everything running. I feel like All of this is in vain. I don't see any way that we can make it out of here alive. I'm not sure what to be more scared of, the zombies or the people that created them. Either way, I know my number's up. Today, one of the cops and I went out in a police car to look for survivors. There are no words I could use to justify the amount of horror and disgust that I felt. There were so many zombies. So many sunken eyes and lipless grins. So much ripped flesh, exposed bones. So many cries of horror and desperation for help. So many gargled screams that followed when the zombies found them. We were useless. We either couldn't find anyone or were too late to help them when we did. The officer and I... Jimmy, I believe his name was. Roaming around the streets, when we found a pack of zombies thrashing at a door. High-pitched screams were coming from the other side. The screams sounded like they were coming from a girl, and we rushed for the group with our guns ready. Jimmy opened fire on the group of zombies, which composed of 4 badly decomposed walking corpses, and one who looked like a regular middle-aged man with a small bite on his right leg. I squeezed out a few rounds myself. Jimmy was able to bring down 2 of the monsters, but I missed every shot. The remaining zombies were able to break the door before we were able to take them down. They rushed inside, and the panic screams we heard before intensified. I ran as fast as I could, but we failed her. She was a young girl, no older than 10. She didn't deserve what happened to her. None of us did. We left after taking down the rest of the zombies. There was nothing else for us to do. I took some time and I thought about the little girl. The sounds of her screams lingered in my mind. I'd never heard such pain and desperation from anyone in my life before, but I was sure I would hear more the coming days. I dreaded the thought that the last screams I would hear would be my own. This rescue mission was a mistake. It's the last time I'm going out of the police station. Nowhere else is safe. Lock 11. I almost died today. Our sanctuary was attacked. So many people died. We knew how to kill the zombies and protect ourselves from them, but the enemy that attacked us was nothing like them. We weren't prepared for it. I was on the 2nd floor when it came. I was with some of the other survivors when we suddenly heard gunfire outside. The first few shots were followed by several more. Then more guns seemed to join in. We heard screams of agony accompanied by less gunfire. Until finally there was nothing. A long moment of silence followed. Everyone watched and waited to see what had happened, but nothing moved. My curiosity got the better of me and I began to run downstairs. I had just reached the bottom floor when the sound of the front doorknob being turned caught my attention. I instinctively ran partially down the next set of stairs. I was able to see what was happening, all at the same time being hidden from view. The doorknob turned fully and the door creaked slowly open. The monster there was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was tall and skeletal with pale white skin. It had slits for nostrils and deep black eyes. They shifted quickly. I think he was counting how many of us there were. I ducked down further. He shifted around and let out a high-pitched shriek. I saw him sprint forward and jump onto the 2nd floor balcony. It must have been a 15-foot jump up, and it cleared it so easily. I ran downstairs. The ambient sound of screaming and thrashing fueled my movements. I reached my lab and did the only thing I could think of. I hid in one of the shelves meant for the dead and covered myself in a thin black sheet. I pulled the shelf closed. I didn't know what else to do, so I waited. The horrors upstairs didn't sound here, and that brought me some relief. After a few minutes, I heard the sound of something cautiously walking around. Its slow steps could have belonged to anyone, a survivor looking for others or a hunter looking for its prey. I could hear the doors squeaking open. I could hear the footsteps coming closer, and worst of all, I could hear the sound of the shelf next to me sliding open. Moments later, the shelf above that one was opened. I could feel the small vibrations of something grabbing onto my shelf. I closed my eyes as my shelf was being slid open. The sudden sound of gunfire forced me to look back at the situation. I opened my eyes, and through the thin blanket I saw 3 police officers shooting frantically at the beast. It was hit by the first few shots, but shrugged them off fairly easily. It dashed forward and immediately impaled one of the cops with its talon-like fingers. Its talon pierced all the way through the first cop's body and to the other side. The second officer was immediately thrown against the wall. He hit his head on the wall and didn't move. The last officer fired frantically, and to my surprise, the bullet seemed to be slowing the beast down. Its movements became slower and far more labored. It impaled the last officer with its talons and raised him up to face it. It sunk its long, jagged teeth into the officer's neck. It tore away chunk after chunk of his throat. I watched as it swallowed mouthfuls of meat with ravenous glee. When it finished, it lazily dropped the body down and turned back to the second officer. It walked to him and started to run its blood-soaked talons over him. The beast examined him with a gentleness I didn't think it was possible to have. It grabbed the officer and rested him on its shoulder. It opened the doors out of the lab. And in moments, it was gone. I was so scared. I waited for hours before I even dared to try to leave the room. And when I finally left, I quickly found out that I was the only survivor. There were so many bodies scattered everywhere. I couldn't stay here. I ran back to my laptop. I started writing this. I wanted to warn the next person to travel here that the place isn't safe. Everything outside can still get us here. Nowhere is safe. I'm leaving here first thing in the morning. I wish I left when I had the chance, but I'm stuck here now. I'm going to get out and find others. The last thing I want to do is die alone here. Wow, Trent said. That's heavy. Trent looked deeply shaken. He lost all his normal confidence and self-assurance that made him such an asset during the time in the Plagueland. Yeah. I exhaled. It also explains all the bodies everywhere. Trent nodded. We sat there completely silent for what seemed to be hours. Now what? Trent said, finally breaking the silence. If there isn't anywhere safe, then where do we go? We're not going anywhere, I replied nonchalantly. This place may not be safe, but it's better than anywhere else we've been. Trent looked unconvinced. We can't let people just wander outside. This place, at least, has protection from the zombies. Still, Trent replied just as grimly as before. I can't see this place being safe enough. It's because it's not. Nowhere is safe. But this is our best shot. I rested my hand on Trent's shoulder. Don't worry. We'll make it work. What do we do with the laptop? I contemplated his question for a moment. It seemed like this man had made this document to warn people off this place, which would be a problem if we were planning to make this place a stronghold. We'll put it with the bodies in the incinerator. The truth this man found won't help anyone anymore. Trent hesitated for a moment, but nodded.